From emails to reports and project proposals, it's hard to meet the demands of today's competing priorities without some help. Grammarly is the essential AI communication assistant that boosts your productivity at work so you can get more of what you need done faster. Just a few clicks can tailor your tone and writing so you come across exactly as you intend. Get time back to focus on your high-impact work. Download Grammarly for free at grammarly.com/podcast. That's grammarly.com/podcast.
Welcome to the Inspire to Invest podcast, where we're sharing inspiring stories from business owners, entrepreneurs, and real estate investors on the pursuit of wealth and financial freedom. This episode of the Inspire to Invest podcast has been brought to you by the GeoFocus Group. Hey everybody, welcome to Inspire to Invest. I've got Adam Altobelli here with me from the GeoFocus Group in Vaughan. He is the president of this development and construction management firm that's dedicated to helping clients navigate the complexities of real estate projects from acquisition through to completion. He is also the president of Buy Dirt Developments, focusing on purpose-built rental acquisition and development ventures. With extensive experience in multifamily development, commercial projects, and purpose-built rentals, Adam delivers value through transparency, accountability, and practical solutions. His commitment to supporting his clients in making informed decisions has positioned both the GeoFocus Group and Buy Dirt Developments as trusted partners in the industry. Thanks, Adam. How are you today?
Thanks, Serena. Great. How are you?
Good, thank you. So thanks for spending time out of your day to be with us. I obviously have had the chance to get to know you a little bit outside of this podcast, but for anyone that doesn't know you, can you take us back to the beginning and how you got into this field? Because obviously it's pretty significant in terms of the work that you're doing. So I'd love to give everybody a little bit of backstory on you.
Yeah, absolutely. I was pretty much born into it. My father's always been in the construction and development industry, and growing up, I grew up on construction sites. So it was a natural evolution for me, really, from going through high school and working in the business to going through university and working in the business to eventually getting into the business full time.
Yeah, awesome. They got you started right away.
They did.
So now not everybody likes to go into a family business. Like obviously you naturally gravitated there, but was there ever a time where you thought like, I don't know if this is for me, like I want to do my own thing?
There was a small period where I kind of branched out and did my own thing, but it was to supplement what we were doing as a company as a whole. So I created a few businesses, GeoFocus Mold Solutions, Via Virtual, to help supplement what we were doing on the construction side. So as an example, GeoFocus Mold Solutions was assisting our clients that were having disaster restoration problems, required asbestos abatement or mold remediation. So I did branch off into that, but I naturally gravitated back towards construction. That's where my love is, my passion is construction and development. And I ended up falling right back into essentially running the show here at the GeoFocus Group on the construction and development side of things.
Now, to be clear, you guys aren't the actual construction company though, right? So can you talk a little bit about how you support developers and like really where your role would come in, either from the beginning or when you come in to kind of save the day?
Yeah, great question. So, and that's a question we get often, what do you guys do? It looks like you guys do a lot of different things, and we do. So from developer side of things, we can get involved as early as site selection. And let's use purpose-built rentals as an example. When developers are looking to acquire land, we're coming in to assist with that site selection process.
Yeah.
When that land is acquired, we're assisting them with the due diligence. Then we get into design development. Then we get into retaining trade contractors. So we're providing more of a construction management type relationship. Yeah. I'd say 95+% of what we do today is construction management related. We do offer general contracting services. However, we find that's more of a confrontational component to it, whereas construction managers,
we're working more as
working as a collaborative partner and working towards really trying to maximize efficiencies for both our clients and ourselves.
Now, when you look back at all the projects that you've been involved with, since obviously this has been pretty much the majority of your career, what would you say is one of your biggest successes?
I'd say the biggest one and the one that we discussed most often with new clients is the Randall Residences in Oakville, Ontario. It was an ultra luxury condominium development developed by Rosehaven Homes. We were retained as construction managers, and that's probably one of the highest profile projects we've been involved in to date.
Now, for someone that's considering using you, like what would be ideally the perfect step to have you guys involved? Because I know that you've shared in the past, sometimes you're brought in to save a project or restructure a project and you're adding a different lens to it and things like that. So ideally, when a client's coming to you, how would you prefer to see that relationship develop?
So it depends on the client, and the reason why I say that is we typically focus on two client segments. One is new developers who haven't been in this business before, and the other is experienced developers that are transitioning to a new market segment. The new developers bringing us in as early as possible, as they may not have that insight into acquiring land or putting together consulting teams or things of that nature. Experienced developers sometimes can bring us in a little bit later. They have the experience in acquiring properties. It just may be for a different segment now. Um, but in all cases, the earlier the better, because we do bring that lens of taking projects over that have gone sideways. And really, in those situations, we're brought in to identify what went wrong, work backwards to fix them, and move those projects forward.
Yeah.
And that's given us the niche experience to really identify those red flags, problems, and issues, hopefully earlier than our competition.
Now, obviously, there has been a lot of like crazy things happening in this last couple of years. And when you talk about challenges, can you give a couple of examples where you did come in where a project was going off the rails and what you guys did to get it back on track and see it through to completion?
I would say the most common in the last 2 years has been developers over designing projects. And that results or happens from a few different things or from a few different perspectives. One of those being the team that they surround themselves with. So if they're surrounding themselves with a team that specializes in single family homes, but now they want to build purpose-built rentals, what we've seen in those types of situations is projects being over designed, budgets being extremely inflated than what would have been reasonable to execute that development.
Yeah.
And in more cases than not, we've had to come in and essentially scrap those designs and start over.
Yeah.
It's a difficult lesson for developers to learn on their first go around, but we find it's an important lesson, and they learn not to make that mistake going forward with their second project.
Yeah. If they're around for a second project, I guess.
Exactly.
Now, in terms of things like obstacles, when you look at just running the business in general, what would you say are one of the biggest challenges that you faced just in terms of your overall operations?
I'd say personnel, and I'd say because we've always had a low and slow growth approach, we want to build the team correctly and finding people who are like-minded. A lot of people that are in our company right now, a lot of the personnel have a very similar upbringing to myself. They grew up in the industry.
Yeah.
So they understand everything from boots on the ground. That's what they kind of sludged through in their earlier days as little ones and really transitioned and were brought back into the business as they got older. Finding that level of personnel to bring on board and also taking that a step further, trying to find personnel that had experience or have experience in takeovers, that's been very difficult. They're few and far between.
It's very specialized, right?
Yeah.
Now, since you have been in the business, you've gone through different real estate cycles and just, different crazy things like COVID and stuff like that. Can you identify what you think is like one of those craziest times that you've been through, just in terms of, just trying to stay on top of things and managing the business as a whole?
I'd say there's really two. One is the 2007, 2008 crash.
Yeah.
That brought us more takeover projects than I've ever seen in my career.
Yeah.
And COVID brought hyperinflation. So they were two very different situations. I would say COVID was probably the more challenging with, developers were pegging their projects at X dollar per square foot, and all of a sudden, it's 50 to 100% more expensive.
Yeah.
That's a challenge that you can't typically overcome
Yeah.
unless you value engineer or redesign. And we did a lot of that during the COVID crisis.
Yeah, and I think the biggest lesson too is like, people thought the pandemic itself was the challenge. And there it came with challenges, especially if you weren't an essential worker and stuff like that. But at
Yeah.
the same time, there was subsidies in place. Gas was the lowest it had been in years, and there was different things maybe the government had put in place to give people a break because maybe they couldn't work. But I think what nobody was prepared for was like the ripple effects after, right? When it came to inflation, we all kind of came out of COVID thinking like, okay, we're done now, like the smoke is cleared. And it's like, nah,
Absolutely.
hang on. So I think that's
And we're
something
going
just
through
in
something
general of
similar
kind
like
of,
that now with the tariffs.
yeah,
And we'll get through it. Things like this happen when I speak to my father, who's been in the industry since the 70s.
yeah,
Don't complain. It's not so bad out there.
yeah.
So we'll get through it. Something else will come up and we'll get through that too.
Now, speaking of your dad, since obviously he's why you are where you are in many ways today. How involved is he? Like, do you call him up often still and you're like, Dad, like, what do I do here?
From a strategic advisory perspective, absolutely. He's got 30, 40 more years of experience than I do in the field. So
Yeah.
there's just things that he's seen a lot more of than I have. So it is an invaluable tool, and it's an invaluable resource that I use quite often.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think it's one of those inherent things that, you can teach what you can, but until you've gone through it, it's something he might be like, oh, in 1983, we went through whatever, whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Things
that's
change, the
amazing.
industry evolves, and there's things that may not be applicable, but there's a lot that still is applicable in the industry for sure.
Yeah. Now, when it comes to things like lessons, what would you say is one of the toughest lessons that you've had to learn as you've, you know, molded into this role as the business owner and the president?
I'd say taking ego out of everything. You can't build a business, especially in the construction industry and especially in development, because it's full of egos. And if you can't have those tough conversations with your client and vice versa, unfortunately, we have to tell a lot of people that your project, this isn't the right one. It's not working out. You've put a lot of money into it, but your best decision is going to be to walk away from it. Those are tough conversations to have. Sometimes those conversations aren't well received. But that's been the biggest lesson. Earlier in my career, when I was younger, there was a lot of ego there as you're trying to prove yourself and you
Yeah,
don't have that experience and you kind of have to bank on that bravado a little bit.
yeah,
More so now, it's really just working through those things, setting ego aside, having those tough discussions, always keeping in mind the best interest of our clients.
yeah. And I think that's a big thing is just positioning yourself that you're trying to help and you're trying to provide that value, save a project or save costs from the outset and stuff like that, right? So I think
Yeah.
the average person hopefully would be very receptive to that, but I can see if two, strong personalities come into a room where they can butt heads a little bit.
Absolutely. And you have to be that way to be in the development and construction industry.
Yeah,
But I find the older you get in this industry, the easier it gets to have those discussions. When we have those discussions with younger development groups, we'll get through them. It just takes a little bit longer to make sure everybody understands we're not having those hard discussions to sway you from doing what you're trying to do. We're having those tough discussions to make sure that you can continue to do what you're trying to do for a long time.
yeah, no, that makes sense. Now, on that note, we're just going to take a really brief break for a word from our sponsors, and we'll be right back.
Whether you are launching your first development or shifting your portfolio into the missing middle, land development and construction come with challenges. The GeoFocus Group helps you navigate those challenges with clarity, structure, and confidence. With decades of experience managing complex builds, turning around stalled projects, and recovering timelines and budgets, our team is trusted by an extensive roster of developers and investors. Today, we bring that same level of precision to the growing purpose-built rental market, helping both new and experienced developers succeed in delivering needed housing. We support your project from the earliest stages of acquisition and due diligence through zoning, site plan approvals, and permit submissions. Checks. With purpose-built rentals becoming a key part of long-term housing strategy in communities of all sizes, the need for experienced project leadership is greater than ever.
I value transparency, integrity, and trust. If you choose to work with me, you can be assured that business will be conducted honestly and openly. Time is of the essence in this industry, so you can expect nothing short of quick, clear communication from me. I'll keep you informed every step of the way so you feel comfortable throughout this entire process. Our homes are where we eat, sleep, relax, and play. My clients' best interests are at the heart of everything I do. And with this said, my service to you doesn't end when the transaction does. As your realtor, I'll not only help you buy and sell your property, I'll also educate and support you along the way. I want to help you fulfill your goal of homeownership and become your trusted real estate resource for life. I can't wait to share my passion for real estate with you. More importantly, to find you the perfect house to turn into your home. Looking to buy, sell, or invest in Durham Region or Toronto? Let's chat. Inspired to Invest is proud to support the Beyond Success program. In today's complex world, it's absolutely crucial for our youth to learn how to take charge of their financial future. We believe that every young person deserves access to accurate, practical financial information. Designed to bridge the gap, the Beyond Success program leverages a comprehensive educational bootcamp to equip young minds with essential financial literacy skills. At Beyond Success, it's not just about teaching financial literacy, it's also about fostering a foundation for a prosperous and empowered future. Join us. Together we can build a brighter financial future for the next generations. Join us. Together we can build a brighter financial future for the next generations. Hey everybody, welcome back to Inspired to Invest. I've got Adam Altobelli here. He's the president of the GeoFocus Group. And I'm going to forget the name of your other company. Fill me in. The Dirt Development. Yes. Thank you for that. So we've talked about a lot of different things just in terms of how you got started in this industry and the challenges and lessons that you've learned. What would you say is the absolute craziest thing that you've ever encountered during your career so far?
On the takeover side of things, I've seen countless people lose everything. And that's a tough lesson to learn when you're younger. When you're younger, getting in the industry, you think there's only green lights and blue skies. But I think that's helped mold me and the rest of the company into what we are today. But seeing people lose everything in the construction and development industry, having those tough discussions with them when they're at their lowest point, now that's a tough thing to see for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree that I always really like the tangibility of real estate, right? You can touch it, you can feel it. To me, it felt like the stock market is like elusive, it's intangible. And it was like, you hear there's risks in real estate. And I was like, as long as you're diversified, like the value is the real estate. But then obviously just these last couple of years have really changed that for a lot of people, right? And I think it's going to really change the perspective of at least the landscape when it comes to investment and things like that going forward. So I think it is something to keep in mind that even if you think you're diversified in company, there's a lot of value even diversifying across different industries or different locations and things like that, because I think, you could plant all your seeds in a field or something. Well, if a bomb hits that field, it doesn't matter that your seeds are on one side of the field or the other. It's still the same field.
And don't overpay for those seeds.
Yeah.
Which is what we've seen a lot of in the last 2-3 years.
Yeah.
That's been a huge hurdle for a lot of people to overcome. Prices have kind of inched their way back into reality.
Yeah, inching one tiny half inch at a time. Now, in terms of the best advice, obviously you've got such an amazing resource being your dad. What would you say is the best advice that he's ever given you, or even maybe other people that you've met along the way?
I would say one of the biggest lessons I learned from a large developer, as we were transitioning from our sole focus on projects that were being taken over, recovered, turned around, was at all costs try not to burn bridges. You don't know what somebody's going through in the industry. You don't know what their intentions are. Do what's best for you, but try not to burn those bridges, because you're going to run into these people along or throughout your career if you're in this industry for a long time. That was one that really kind of set me back a little bit on the takeover and turnaround side of things. You're dropped into a frying pan in the middle of the fire, and the relationship component of that really isn't as important as saving the client in the project. So that really brought a different focus, and gave me a little bit of a different strategy as we approach some of these relationships, especially as the focus is now turned to new builds, and new developments.
Now, since we have had the chance to talk in other environments and things like that, when it comes to things like due diligence, what would you say is some of the most important things? Because I know we talked about things like trust, and that, not everyone is out there to help you or could be trustworthy. So what would you say are some of the red flags that you've identified when, you don't know what you don't know? So if you're coming in as a new developer, you've got those shiny glasses on, you think things are going to be a certain way, but what could help them really understand, like, if they should go one way or another way?
Great question, and something we deal with on a daily basis. There's due diligence for your lender, and then there's due diligence for yourself. Just because you can pass kind of the due diligence for your lender, doesn't mean you should acquire property. And we see a lot of people come in and say, yeah, we did everything our lender required. This should be a great opportunity. Well, you didn't do a geotechnical investigation, and you may not have done a site servicing report. Do you know if there's utilities there from a hydro perspective, or infrastructure from sewer and water?
Yeah.
Those are project killers that if you're not attempting to identify those things at the earliest stages of your acquisition, could derail your development, and essentially that parcel of land that you bought to put on X amount of units. Well, if it can only yield 80 or 90% less, you're going to take a big hit in value.
Yeah. Now, in terms of things like opportunities, like it feels like, the GTA is saturated in some ways, but where would you personally think are some of the greatest opportunities right now that people should be paying more close attention to?
We're seeing them everywhere. We essentially have files from New Brunswick to Vancouver down to Southwest Florida.
Well,
And I would say it's different in every market. Right? Toronto has a much higher acquisition cost, but it's going to be a little bit less risky on the lease up or stabilization side, especially on multifamily purpose-built rental. Whereas if you transition out into those secondary, tertiary markets, you can absolutely find great opportunities. Your acquisition cost is going to be a little bit lower. The rents are still strong, but you don't have that population base or even knowledge on the lender side, depending on what market you're in. So I think those opportunities are still prevalent everywhere. I think a lot of what we're seeing right now is more missing middle, purpose-built rental in that mid-rise and below, and that 10 unit and under has really taken off in the last year.
Yeah.
And I would say that purpose-built rental missing middle 10 unit and under is probably one of the biggest opportunities we're seeing in the market right now, both with new developers and even large and small developers that are transitioning into that market segment.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Now, in terms of things like what's next for you, obviously it sounds like your company is pretty robust as it is. Like, do you have an idea in mind of how far you'd like to take things and what's next for you, just in pursuit of your own financial freedom and like, to be like, I've made it, maybe you feel like you've already hit that pinnacle, but what would you say is next?
I don't feel like I've made it, and I don't know if I ever will. When you're doing what you love, it's whenever I've hit a milestone or a goal, it's just let's get on to the next one. I think for us right now, it's maximizing on the opportunity of these missing middle purpose-built rentals. And we're starting to see a little bit of an uptick in condominium development. Nothing to get too excited about. I think it's going to be a long haul before the condo market comes back. But just continuing to build our teams internally and get ready for when that sector makes its kind of reemergence. And just be ready for those opportunities. We fell in the niche of this purpose-built rental, especially this missing middle, and it was a blessing in disguise. I think a lot of work has flowed into that segment of what we do now. So it's just being prepared for what's going to happen next. There's going to be another pivot. So you just got to be ready for it.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And I think just not to wait when you see an opportunity. Like I saw a piece of land actually close to where I am in Pickering, and I just saw the for sale sign and I didn't look into it right away. But it turned out it was this 10-acre parcel of land, and Tuck had put in $500 million of resources in all the area around it. But then because of the moratorium on building on, the green space and stuff like that, there's a short-term ban of maybe 5 to 8 years. But at the end of the day, you could probably put anywhere from 70 detached homes to like 140 townhouses on that parcel. It's being sold for $3 million. I'm like, imagine you bought that with some like 30 investors, 100,000 a piece, and just held on to that for the next 5 years. Right? Like, because everything had kind of gone in. And of course, by the time I went, which was a few days later, it sold conditional. And I was like, because it was a perfect spot because Pickering is still close enough to the GTA that I could see how attractive that would be to build. And it just kind of worked out that I happened to drive by and those couple days passed. So I'll probably kick myself on that when I see whatever development goes in 5 or 10 years from now.
Hindsight's always 2020. And if you're in this game long enough, you're going to have hundreds of those. So you just got to focus on what you can focus on and close on the ones that you can close on. But we've all seen those opportunities. We've all passed them. Hindsight's 2020.
Do you know a lot of people that are involved in things like land banking?
Yeah.
I think that's something that I found really interesting. I had dinner with a real estate lawyer at the end of last year, and they were talking about all this land banking they're doing in Ottawa, which I found just like an intriguing conversation because obviously they don't intend to develop it now, but the thought is like they're not making any more land.
And a lot of them just focus on land banking. They never get into development. They see it as kind of a risk mitigated way to get involved, pick up a piece of land where that investment is going to be secured by that land, and just wait until it goes up. It's a long-term game. It's a long-term play. but we've seen a lot of people do very well in that market.
Yeah.
But most of the land bankers I know will not touch new construction.
Yeah.
They see it as too much of a risk to jump in that game,
Yeah.
and they like that low and slow approach to
Yeah.
growth of their valuation of their parcels of land.
I have a possible client that I've been talking to right now that him and his wife bought some land in North Whitby, and it's industrial. It's 10 acres that they bought for $225,000 20 years ago.
Yeah,
And then now they're thinking it's in the range of 10 million. So imagine, like that is
absolutely.
an incredible jump, right?
Yep.
And I mean, I think really their roadblock is that one person in that group thinks it's worth more, like actually like 28 million. In
Yeah,
my research, industrial is maybe 500,000 to a million per acre. So it's probably in that range of 5 to 10 million. So
yeah,
they need to decide like, are they willing to take that concession? You still have your
for
capital
sure.
gains to consider, but that's still to go from
Either way, it's a great
225,000 or
one.
whatever to this in 20 years, like that to have done nothing
Absolutely.
but just bought it and let it sit
Yeah,
is crazy, right?
yeah,
So yeah, it'll
no,
be
for
interesting to
sure.
see what another 20 years would do to that same piece of land, right?
100%. Sometimes you just gotta jump on those opportunities though, when that dollar per acre or
Yeah.
square foot is at its peak, or you can cash out. You never know what tomorrow brings. So
Yeah.
it's just another kind of
Another
a way to
strategy.
mitigate those entries and exits.
Yeah, no, for sure. Now, in terms of quotes, obviously the name of this podcast is Inspire to Invest. So I always like to ask people if they have a particular quote that they love that really motivates them.
For my clients, it's bad news early is good news. And that's at every stage of the development and construction life cycle, from
Yeah,
acquisition all the way to post-construction. And that's something we probably say in the office, I don't know, 100 times a day. Um, we
yeah,
don't want to hoard bad news. We want the bad news to flow. And if we can get through that bad news and our clients are still in a great position, or we're in a great position as developers, that's a great position to be in. But not knowing that bad news, getting that bad news late, that's always a dangerous position to be in.
yeah. Awesome. So for anyone that wants to get in touch to learn about what you do, or maybe they need help with their project, what is the best way for them to find you?
Probably on the internet, www.thegeofocusgroup.com, or on LinkedIn. Those are probably the two best methods of connecting with me.
Perfect. So we'll include that in the show notes below for anyone that does want to find you. Of course, thank you for taking time out of your busy day to be with us today. And for anyone that is watching or listening, if you've enjoyed this episode, make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe. And you can also follow along with us on social at Inspired to Invest Podcast. And remember, when you invest in yourself, the sky is the limit. Thanks again. Thank you to the GeoFocus Group for bringing you this episode of Inspired to Invest. The views represented on this podcast are for general information only and does not constitute investment or other professional advice or an offering of securities. The host and guests featured on Inspired to Invest make no representations as to the performance of any particular investment. Should you decide to make an investment, you are responsible for conducting your own review and analysis. It is recommended that you obtain independent legal, accounting, and tax advice from licensed professionals.
Here in America, work is in trouble. We've offshored our manufacturing, sent away good jobs, and lost so much ability to make things. American Giant is a company that's pushing back against this tide. They make high-quality clothing, sweatshirts, jeans, dresses, jackets, and so much more, right here in the USA. Visit American-Giant.com and get 20% off your first order when you use code STAPLE20 at checkout. That's 20% off your first order at American-Giant.com, promo code STAPLE20.